You might be wondering right now, Ryan, what are you doing putting out a draft strategy video out in April before any NFL draft has happened, before any movement is about to happen in the NFL in actuality? What if I told you that you could find some of the best values in fantasy football drafts this early on in the offseason before anything has even taken place in the actual NFL draft? Landing spots are going to change here in the next several weeks in fantasy football, and this is going to affect the players' rankings and where they're going in fantasy football drafts. And one of my favorite things to do this time of year to get ahead of everybody else who's not paying attention is to go through a couple of drafts this early on to see if I can hit on some guys who haven't been drafted yet but have tons of upside and they're going into mid to late rounds. And let's say that they get drafted really high and their draft price shoots up after the draft. We're trying to take advantage of that right now today. So to start this video off, let me just go through obviously what you need to have a winning fantasy football team. First of all, you need to hit on your top guys. You have to hit on your first round player, your second round player, or you're not going to win in fantasy football. I would say 90 to 95% of leagues, the guys who are winning the leagues are hitting on either their first or their second round pick. But of course, you're going to need more than just a hit on your first, second round pick. The thing you're going to really need to hit on as well is if you can find yourself a mid-round value. If you can find yourself a Jordan Addison, that would be really impactful for your fantasy football roster. And the other thing that you're going to need is you need to hit on one late round guy. When you hit on a late round guy, if you have both of those other two things in place, the chances that you're going to win your league are skyrocketed at this point. Hit on a late round guy like Puka Nacua. Now, if you notice, the two names that I brought up here, they were both rookies last year in fantasy football, and they made a tremendous impact on so many winning teams in fantasy last year because they were mid to late round values in fantasy football drafts. Now, a lot of the top rookies right now in fantasy football drafts, they're already going super, super high. Marvin Harrison Jr. is the wide receiver 9 right now in underdog drafts. Little too rich if you ask me. Wish that price was a little bit lower. Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, they're both going around the wide receiver 15 to 30 range in underdog drafts right now as well. So those top guys in the draft, they've already got baked into their price how high they're going to go in the NFL draft in just about a week from now. But what about the mid-round guys? What about guys who have tons of upside but aren't necessarily considered to be first-round guys? Guys like Xavier Legette out of South Carolina. Guys like Trey Benson out of Florida State. Someone like Ricky Pearsall out of Florida. And maybe Keon Coleman out of Florida State here. These are mid to late round guys with tons of upside right away in fantasy football that could make the difference on your fantasy football team right out of the gate. Now, the guys that I just mentioned here, Legette, Benson, Pearsall, Coleman, they're expected to be day 2 to 3 picks, which would put them in the 3rd, 2nd, and 4th and beyond rounds in the NFL draft. But what if they get drafted higher though? What if we get a guy like Xavier Legette in the 1st round? The reason I asked that question is because his name has been tossed around as a potential 1st rounder for about a month at this point because he had such a strong last season in college football. What if they go to a great landing spot as well? What if a guy like Trey Benson goes to a running back needy team? Someone like the Los Angeles Chargers, the Minnesota Vikings, the Las Vegas Raiders. Those are all running back needy teams that could absolutely use a great running back prospect, who I don't think Trey Benson is a great running back prospect, but I do think that he's the best of the bunch and has plenty of physical tools to work with. Those teams could use that running back right out of the gate. And what would happen is their draft prices in fantasy football, those would change immediately, and they wouldn't be great values in fantasy football drafts anymore. Unless you drafted them today before the NFL draft has taken place. Listen, this strategy is all about taking shots right now, and we're going to go through some potential ideas that I have about teams and players that could go and what directions that they could go in the NFL draft in just about a week. Let's look at the Los Angeles Chargers right now. So obviously they've got a new head coach in town, Jim Harbaugh, very successful guy. One thing we know about him is he likes to run the football a lot, but they do have a clear need at the wide receiver position here. Now, a popular name has been Malik Neighbors. And if you ask me, that is part of the reason why I believe baked into his price right now is why he's going as a top 20 wide receiver in underdog drafts. What if they go with Rome Odunze? What if they prefer Rome Odunze over Malik Neighbors and he goes to the Chargers and Malik Neighbors goes to the landing spot a lot of people are associating with Rome Odunze, the New York Giants? That would change everything. And all of a sudden, Malik Neighbors wouldn't look like such a great pick in fantasy football drafts, and Rome Odunze at this time would look like an excellent pick in fantasy football drafts. And as I said earlier, they're a running back needy team as well. So what if they decide to go on the offensive line in the first round and then go with a running back in the second round like Trey Benson? Not only would Trey Benson's value shoot up, but Quentin Johnston's value would shoot up as well. And let me tell you this, you could see his draft price on the screen. Quentin Johnston is an unreal value right now. I don't think he's very good. I was not big on him last year. Ironically, I've come around and I've drafted him in several leagues this year because of where you're getting him at. And as of right now, he is the wide receiver 1 in Los Angeles. Let's look at another team, the Buffalo Bills right now. They traded away Stephon Diggs about a month ago, so we're looking at a clear wide receiver needy team with one of the best quarterbacks in the game, the second best behind Patrick Mahomes with Josh Allen. So think about the need that they need to get a wide receiver and the level of quarterback play they already have. If they can get someone in the late first, someone like a Brian Thomas Jr., think of how much his stock would shoot up in fantasy football drafts if Brian Thomas Jr. went to the Buffalo Bills. He would not be a mid to late round guy anymore. Now again, I think you should take advantage of this opportunity today on Underdog by using code FFN to get a 100% deposit match up to $100 so you can go draft a guy like Brian Thomas Jr., like Rome Odunze. Where they're going right now, if they go to the right team, they may become absolute steals that you walk away with at a much greater value before the NFL draft started. I think you should do it today because I've already been doing it a ton. Now, let's look at some other guys here because I understand that a lot of this video is just based on my theories of what could happen in the NFL draft and what hasn't happened already. Well, let's look at some history here. Let's look at a guy who had a little bit of a lesser payoff, but still contributed to fantasy football teams his rookie year. Johan Dawson of the Washington Commanders. Now, Johan Dawson, if you remember far back, in the 2022 draft, before the draft happened, he was not expected to be a first-round guy. He was expected to be an early day 2 type of guy, either in the second round or the third round. He ended up being a first rounder, and his draft price in fantasy football drafts shot up after the fact that he was drafted as a first round pick. Brandon Aiyuk, a guy that we all know and love very much today in the fantasy football world, he wasn't expected to be a first round pick. The 49ers traded up to get him, and it was a little bit of a shock pick. Obviously, it's turned out great, and his rookie season actually ended up being a very good rookie season, was the wide receiver 35. And again, where you were drafting him beforehand was not at the wide receiver 35. The value became evident after the fact that he got drafted, and it only paid off for people who drafted him before the NFL draft actually happened. So this fantasy football draft strategy right here, what I am trying to say to you is use this opportunity before the NFL draft to take some shots on some guys that are rookies who are mid to late round guys that you know have elite level upside in fantasy football in year 1, because that's all that matters right now. If you're drafting on Underdog, again, do it today using code FFN. If you're drafting on Underdog, this only matters for this year. So you need to get pro-ready rookies. Guys like Xavier Legette, Trey Benson, Keon Coleman, those guys are pro-ready. And again, what if they go in the first round of the draft? If they go in the first round, their draft prices will shoot up very high. And even if they don't get drafted in the first round, if they get drafted to an ideal landing spot, their draft prices will shoot up, and those won't be as good of values anymore. Take advantage of a good value today. Draft at least one team before the NFL draft to get a shot to get some major values at some of the key positions from rookies that we have not seen at the NFL level yet. Now, let me know who you're actively targeting in fantasy football drafts right now, and make sure to go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support. If you got value from this video today,